workshop on the methodology for defining and specifying the health interoperability framework based on the big picture. So I would like to welcome Alain, who is the CTO of KEREVAL and who has more than 30 years experience in the health field. And also Charles Parisot, who is an interoperability expert and has his own firm, Interopehealth. So please.
Sure.
So our subject is to show you how to define a national interoperability framework based on a big picture, and how to understand the process and how to use this process. Our presentation is divided in two parts. The first part is what is the IHE methodology in order to define and manage technical frameworks and integration profiles. And the second part will be how to use this basis, this stuff, in order to define and specify a national interoperability framework. So, Charles?
Yeah. So I will cover the first part, and Alain will be back to cover the second part. Doing teamwork, which is very important when you do interoperability. Never do it alone, because you may not connect to anyone else. Sounds obvious, but I know a number of people that have done interoperability in their own corner, and they were expected the world to come and applaud and adopt what they had done, and of course nothing happened. So building it as teamwork and growing it is extremely important. So as IHE went underway, that was almost 20 years ago, the challenge at this time, which is sometimes still a present challenge, was we have a lot of standards. You know, an average project is about 60, 55, 60 different type of standards when you take all of the detail of different bodies in the IT, in the health space. And you have to connect those standards with a number of projects, and typically it's not one project. When you build interoperability, it's many projects in parallel, because you will have to connect together a number of institutions, connect some infrastructure systems. And the question is, how do you pick and choose the standard? And the assumption was, in the late 90s, wow, we have HL7 version 2, it's just a matter of using it. Everybody was using it in all different ways, in all different versions, with a whole bunch of different extensions. And by that time, after 6 or 7 years, people said, it looks like there is a gap here. And the gap can be filled either in a project by project way, or maybe we could create a process to define that gap in a more global, rational way so that we reduce variation. So what came about was the idea of creating a place where you would mediate, do the 90, 95, 98% all together at the global level, so that you have a body of specification that you can reuse locally in your project with very little additional work. So that was the birth concept of IHE. Along with this, there was another part to the birth concept, is once you had a spec, you had to test it, and test it at a rather large scale. But we're speaking here of specification and testing. So the concept here was to say, let's pick and choose the best among all of those standards, recognize that there will have to be some project-specific extension added, And that way, the various projects, if those are yours, they're all green, but you would use the same thing that in the blue project, because the block in the middle would be the same thing. So the next question was, okay, what do we put in the box? That had not been invented yet, but the idea there was to say, okay, we need to get organized, because if we don't agree on the topic we want to address, we don't know what to put in that box. But, you know, where are the e-health, national e-health strategy? Today, the world is a little clearer, although not completely clear. Roadmap, if you ask country where they are going, a few countries have some roadmap. They have plans 2, 3 years out, 5 years. Of course, those plans are not met, and they are revised as people progress, but that's life in e-health. There was a sense of we have to deal with some legacy that were in the system that had to be connected. So how can we do this? And that's where IHE had to develop a methodology, because to get people from 20, 30 country, 40 country working together and sharing those specifications, we needed a very clear methodology to do that. And the way IHE did it is to say, we're not going to define the methodology and then apply it. That never works. You need to define the methodology as you apply it, because you need a quick feedback, and there is no methodological truth. The methodology is always an opportunistic approach, and it has to be opportunistic. Don't miss the goal, but be opportunistic in how to reach the goal. So, having understood that you need to do teamwork, bring end user, bring vendors, and produce specification that e-health projects will be able to use, that became a pretty clear concept. So the first element that was in place was the process and time. You cannot do this work outside of a certain time framework and a general process, and you have the picture on the side. And at that time, and I want to remind people of it, it's use case based. Interoperability in health will go nowhere if you don't take a practical use case and take them one at a time. When I hear presentation like I heard yesterday from future European projects, each time you hear somebody talk to you about e-health, ask yourself the following question. Have they a clear view of the use cases they're trying to address? If this answer is yes, listen to what they say. If the answer is unclear, or wow, I counted, I think in the e-health project that was going to be launched by the Commission, expand around 20, 25 potential use cases that were kind of hinted at along the presentation. So I went and talked to Enrique, the lead of the project, and say, Enrique, you're going to go nowhere. And he says, I know. And I say, okay, you know, I'm glad. How are you going to get from solving world hunger to solving hunger in a precise context where people will be able to do something practical? And he says, that's my hope, to do that in the first 3 months. I wish him well. We will help him because IHE is part of that project. But this is going to be priority number 1. If you don't understand the need you're trying to address, you will certainly never be successful. As I am saying it, you probably say, this guy is stating obvious things. Yeah, except that 2/3 of the e-health project have not a well-defined use case. And they wonder a year or 2 later that they're not quite sure what they achieved. Because if the use case is undefined, the goal will be and remain elusive. So, having a use case understanding, And I remind people that a use case is something that everyone will understand, from the citizen to the physician, to the politician, to the engineer, to the architect, to the software developers. All of those people have to read the same use case. So it's going to be a few pages with a few very simple pictures, no massive UML drawings and so forth, very simple human understandable thing. That's a real definition of a use case. Of course, you can always refine it and embellish it behind the scene, but that upfront definition is a critical element. And then IHE said, if I have a use case well defined, I need to put in front of that use case one or a few profile. Profile was a term introduced to say, this is something that tells you how to package standards. An implementation guideline is another term that is being used. So an example of a profile here, it's a patient demographic query. We've done patient demographic query in HL7 v2.5. We've done patient demographic query in HL7 v3. We've done patient demographic query in FHIR. All of those are called PDQ. They are incompatible profile, but they address the same use case using different standard. This is something IHE said they would never do. Use different standard to address the same use case, because you're selling incompatibility. Unfortunately, people have a tendency to think that the last fad in terms of standard is better than the previous one, is better than the previous one. Yeah, better on certain aspects, but remember one thing, and for those who were in the session yesterday, Marcello Melgara said, if you got interoperability that works, whatever the standard you used, if it's widely recognized, continue using it, don't change. You are solving a useless problem in changing standard for the sake of changing a standard. That sounds very regressive. You don't want to do everything in FHIR? No, I want to do new things in FHIR, and I want to do things that are well adapted to the FHIR standard. But redoing everything in FHIR is a waste of time if it's working. Have you redesigned email in FHIR, in REST? Not at all. Your email is working based on SMTP that was designed in 1978, and it's still working on that basis, and it works very well, and nobody would ever think of changing the standard or redesign it. A few have tried, but they've been told, ignored, get out of here, okay? So let's be careful. We need to have very clear use case. The choice of a standard is an opportunistic choice at a point in time. And if you've made that choice and if it works, be happy. Solve another problem. Develop your energy and address new use cases. Otherwise, we're going to turn into a circle. We'll solve the patient demographic problem over and over in changing the standard every 5 or 6 years. Side comment. That was an example of a profile. Then the question was, oh, a use case, a profile, healthcare is more complex than this. We need many use cases into many domains. Yeah, oh, wow, yeah, you're right. The radiology schedule workflow and the laboratory ordering and result workflow in the hospitals, they don't share a lot in common except the word order and the word result. The rest is pretty much specific. Okay. Oh, medication and prescription. Oh, another world, and on and on. And I'm moving into devices, and I'm moving into cardiology reports, and so forth and so forth. So you need multiple domains working in parallel, addressing use cases and developing the profile for those use cases. And that's how IHE moved forward and was able to create a portfolio of profiles, about 250 today. And I would say 2/3 of those profiles were widely adopted. 1/3 was never adopted. I should say never, because as I travel around the world, I always meet somebody that says, oh, thank you very much for this profile. And I say, you implemented it? Yeah, it works. Wow, you're the first one in the world that I meet that implemented that profile. We thought it would be a good idea, but nobody picked it up so far. I'm glad you did. I'm glad it was successful. But yes, there is about a third of profiles that were too early, too complex, addressing the use case that was the wrong use case to address at that time. So as you drive profile definition, recognize that there are always edge problems that are very challenging to ignore, because somebody will convince you that this is the central problem of e-health in the world, when it is actually not. But to be able to understand that, it takes analysis, it takes efforts, and it takes a lot of brains to make work together. So you have an example here. So the way IHE basically approach the world is to say each domain has a technical framework, and the technical framework is a collection of profiles related to that domain. So example, you got all of the domains here, patient care coordination, and a set of profiles for that domain. Go on the IHE.net website, go under technical frameworks, and you will find all of those technical frameworks. They are totally open for access and with no limits. So it's just a copyright for stability of the specification. So that's what you find, and in that volume 1, you find the description of the profile, the use cases associated with the profile, and profile are built. And that's my last main point. IHE said, okay, I got use case, I got profile. What is a profile? A profile is a set of transactions between actors. Actors are abstraction of real-world systems, because we don't want to give the name of real-world system. We abstract with actors, and actors have transaction between themselves. This paradigm, designed 20 years ago, 30 years ago, is still working very, very well. So transaction between profiles, between actors, are what a profile is and making. This is why the volume 2 is made of transactions. So you find the integration profile, you find the many actors, the actors, and for between actors you find the transaction. That picture is missing the fact that a transaction is always between two actors. So having done this, we now have a set of building blocks, those integration profile, transactions between actors. And the way they are designed to work together. This is another important characteristics of IHE. We're not doing implementation guide like HL7 does, based on a single standard. Integration profile are based on a combination of standards, in the most general case, and integration profile are intended to be used together. You can pick an integration profile in content. You can bring an IHE profile in terms of a workflow, and you can bring a couple IHE profile in the area of security and privacy. And those profiles are designed to work together. So profiles are building blocks that can be assembled. In order to do a national e-health interoperability specification, you have to assemble multiple profiles. Sometimes you have to fill the gap. You have to invent your own profile because IHE forgot it. Nobody mentioned it, therefore you need to fill the gap. So that's going to be the second part of this presentation. Alain is going to explain to you how we have now learned to move from a collection of profile. We do the layer above, a profile of profile. How do you combine profile to deliver a national e-health interoperability that address a business problem? And that layer of methodology is also important, has been developed over the last 20 years. We are beginning to have a fair amount of good experience between different interoperability framework of different countries. And Alain will give you a number of examples on how to assemble those profiles. And I'm giving here a number of different categories of profile that you find within IHE. Content profile are moved by transport profile, secured by security profile, and in some cases you have complex workflows, so a simple transport is not enough. You need a workflow profile. So use cases and corresponding profile, there is a, on the IHE-Europe website, there is a place in the website where we've taken use cases at the level of a national e-health program, which is a level above the use case of a profile. At that level, we've said, hey, the candidate profile are the following. So this website allows you to, you're not faced with the 250 profile to analyze for your national health problem. There have been a pre-selection that has been done. So profiles have been recognized by ISO, and the methodology to develop profile is an ISO standard now. The EU Commission has identified 27 profile as critical for Europe. You have this brochure available, I think, at the counter downstairs if you don't have it in your bag. So, Alain, what are we going to do with all of those profiles to build our national specs?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Charles, for this introduction to IHE methodology and IHE technical standard and integration profile. So now I will show you how we can use it in order to define, specify, and also manage the evolution of national e-health interoperability framework. So from Charles' presentation, we can say that we have all the basis in order to create this national interoperability framework. We have the IHE methodology, a set of reusable and integrable use case, a set of reusable profile, IHE profile, and if IHE profile are not enough in order to answer your business needs and use case, you can also use the underlying norm and standard and try to profile them in order to answer your use case. So what is a national e-health interoperability framework? We have a short introduction during the keynote just before by Greek Ministry. A national interoperability framework is a set of use cases and related functional and technical specification that should be used by vendors in order to implement products, and with also the interoperability in these products, and also for the development of tools, testing tools, in order to verify, to test the conformance to this functional and technical specification. And the methodology, as Charles said, in order to define this national interoperability framework is a business needs approach. And the top-down approach for business needs, definition of use cases, and after use of profiles in order to specify the implementation. So a national e-health interoperability framework. As I said, that's technical specification, and this, if you want that this national interoperability framework must be adopted by all stakeholders, end users, vendors, clinicians, and so on. It must be supported by e-health national initiative and the Ministry of Health. Defined in collaboration with all stakeholders. It must be a consensus in the definition of the architecture, in the definition of the specification, taken into account legacy process and how we can evolve them and so on. This national interoperability framework is implemented by vendors and usually tested by independent organization, and could be also testing during connectathon and during specific projectathon for this national interoperability framework, in order to be sure that use cases as always correctly addressed. And yeah, that's all. I just want to raise a point of attention. Interoperability use cases can share same concept and sometimes overlap needs. For example, similar actors and similar exchange information. So be careful not to duplicate the concept when you take a use case and you take the related profile and you do the specification, because you can introduce interoperability issues. So instead, try to reuse them. We will see that we can reuse profile in order to answer new use cases. We met an example of this interoperability issue in a French context. We had a different use case, and we had also different specification based on this use case, and this specification integrated profiling of the patient resource. So all over the time, we had different versions of this FHIR patient resource. And when we wanted to address a new use case, we didn't know what version of the resource we wanted to use. So yeah, we must be careful about this profiling a resource and try to have the concept of reusability. As Charles also said, we have an IHE methodology, and the good way is to use this top-down IHE methodology from use case. And in case of national interoperability framework, we have also the business needs. Use this top-down approach for this business needs to the specification. So the first step is to define the national e-health strategy and the business needs. From this national strategy to define a roadmap and the use cases, and the first step from these use cases and using a profile to define a functional and technical specification of these use cases. So the idea is to identify, to try to use IHE profile. This is the best practices in order to develop your own profile. And if you don't have IHE profile answering your use cases, you can define your own profile. But Also in this case, the best practice is to define a profile that could be used in other contexts, either in your national interoperability framework, but also you can propose this profile at the IHE level in order to be used in other contexts worldwide. So this is the global methodology of IHE that was also normalized. So the first step is to define the strategy, and after the roadmap, and after the specifications, functional and technical specification, and after define also the testing strategy in order to be sure that interoperability aspects has been implemented correctly. There is also the implementation of products, and after testing of these products during project pattern, the last step is the deployment of products. During the presentation, I will focus on the red box, and the other box could be a subject of another presentation. So, in the title of this part of presentation, I talk about big picture. What I call the big picture is this part. This is the strategy, the EL strategy of your national project, and the business needs, and also the roadmap. If you have not enough defined this big picture, you will have difficulties in order to develop your national interoperability framework. And the national interoperability framework is the structured part coming from use cases and the level of profiles, and after the level of functional and detailed specification, technical specification. And this national interoperability framework should be used by implementers in order to develop their products, and also for the development of technicals. You will see, I think, today the Gazelle platform. The Gazelle platform is an interoperability testing tools, and it is used to test IHE profile, and also during project pattern your specific use cases and your specific functional and technical specification. So what is a national digital health strategy? This is the first step. You must define what we want, what you want to digitalize in your ES process, and what business needs you want to address. So the business need is business needs or business case is a high-level description of a domain that illustrates the business needs for the use of health information. We can see here some different high-level business cases: patient care pathway, home care, telemedicine, and so on. So you need to have this set of business needs, and this is the first step in order to, in this top-down methodology, to identify the related use cases, and after our profiles will answer these use cases. This is an example from the French ministry. In 2019, our French ministry defined its strategy of digitalization of its information system, with 5 main orientation, 5 main objectives, and I put here the second objective with what's the improvement, the enforcing of security and interoperability. And these 5 objectives have been divided into 26 action, detailed action. And I put here an example of an action. And also in the document, we could see the, let's say, the big picture of their objective for the digitalization with different layers, a technical layer, a service layer, and an application layer. And we can also see in this document first business cases, for example, e-prescription and electronic patient record. So from this first step, which is the strategy and the business use cases, you should define your roadmap, how you will develop, deploy the digitalization of your information system. And the main thing, and Charles also dealt with just before, it's the plan. You must define a plan at short, mid, and long term in order to do step by step and not try to do all things at the same time. And the benefits of this interoperability roadmap is to have a pragmatic approach with small step after small step, and to have, after this integration of these different building blocks, in order to have the whole picture at the end. In this roadmap, you can also include the education of all stakeholders about what interoperability could bring in your business. And this is a guidance to involve all stakeholders. And as I said, the definition of this roadmap and the definition of national e-health interoperability framework should be a consensus between all the stakeholders. So again, this is an example of our French ministry, and they define a document called a doctrine for the e-health deployment of the digitalization of their system. And we can see here a roadmap. A roadmap, you have a first roadmap. It's a 4 years roadmap. And each year you have a focus on the roadmap of the year. And after, we have projects in order to deploy this yearly roadmap. And also in this document, we can see the global architecture of the e-health interoperability system with all the different use cases. And there is also a view for the cross-Europe interoperability. So, as I said, the methodology is a top-down one, from business case to interoperability use case. You have an example here of this first part of the methodology. And here we can see the National ES Interoperability Framework, the structure, an example of structure. You can see here that it is divided in, let's say, health scope, the hospital scope, cross-organization clinical scope, and also, let's say, cross-border for the interoperability with Europe, for example. And in this National ES Interoperability Framework, you have a description of the use cases. We have the link to the interoperability profiles and also interoperability specification. And we can see on this picture that, as Charles said, we have interoperability profiles that can answer one use cases and other one that can do the link between the different use cases. For example, it could be a profile, a content profile answering a use case, and a transaction profile between different use cases. So Charles said that we have a repository of IHE use cases. And the good idea when you are working on your use cases is to look at this interoperability use cases, because in this repository you have the description of the use cases and the link to the IHE profile. So it could help you in order to define your use cases and also your profile to use to answer your use cases. So to go further in this top-down methodology, interoperability use cases consist of interoperability functions that can be realized in the interoperability architecture that you define also step by step from the big picture, and that are based upon interoperability specification based on standard and profiles. So this is the best practice to use to answer your interoperability use cases and needs. When you work on the specifications from a use case, you can have, let's say, different cases in order to do this. The first one, you have an already IHE profile that you can use as is. The second case is you have an existing profile, but this existing IHE profile, which can have extension and the generic part, and you can, let's say, profile it in order to answer your use case. The first case is you have an existing profile, but it's not cover all your use case, so you need to add an extension in your specification. And the last case is you have no IHE profile to answer your use case, so you will use the underlying norm and standards, Telecoms, HL-set, IETF, and so on, in order to specify your use case. But the best practice is first try to define a profile that could be used in other use cases, and if possible, you can try to propose this profile to IHE in order to put it in the IHE repository of profile. So this is an example, and when you have this use case and you work on this use case, firstly you define the functional specification for the information to exchange and how to exchange it, and after you try to find the IHE profile that could be used. And in this example, we have 5 choices. The first one is to use standard HL fire messaging with profiling. The second one is to use the MHG profile, but this MHG profile does not cover all the functional specification, so you will need an extension. The first choice is to use fire and the RESTful exchange methodology, REST profiling. The fourth choice is to use IHE-Europe profile, and the fifth choice is to use HL7 standard, so without any profile. That we need to provide. And the final choice is discussed with all the stakeholders, the vendors, the Ministry of Health, and so on, in order to choose the right case. So as we can see, profiling is necessary in order to address your specific needs. But be careful not to profile too much. If you do too specific profile or too specific specification, you will not be able to reuse it in other use cases. So it's not the right way. And it will also not possible to propose this profile, for example, at the IHE level. Oh, sorry. And from our feedbacks and from IHE feedbacks, in the IHE profile, when you use IHE profile, you don't need to profile more than 20%. So this is the best practices. And the profiling activities could also be a good way to be involved also in IHE International Technical Framework, Technical Committee, sorry, which manage the technical framework and the integration profile. And we saw also that you can have some issues about the choice of the best architecture to answer business and use case needs. And yeah, it should be a consensus between all the stakeholders, also the interoperability requirements and their added values, and also already business processes deployed. Do we have to modify it? What is the cost to modify it, and so on? And already deployed products. So this is another example. So we have to improve the digitalization of system managing disabled person, and to choose the right structure for this disabled person. And we have 3 different subsystems, and we need to add interoperability between these 3 systems. And we have 2 choices. The first choice is to have point-to-point interaction between this system. And the second one is to have a centralized repository that could manage the electronic record of this disease person, and this electronic record could be shared between the different systems. So the final decision has been taken between all the stakeholders. So now we have, let's say, the first version of our national interoperability system. We can see here that it's a mix of use cases and specification based on IHE profile, based on the IHE profile plus extension, with IHE profile for your needs, and also for a specific norm and standard profiling. Okay, so this is the first step. We have our first version, but now what about the maintenance and the evolution of this national interoperability standard framework? Sorry, because as we said, we have a roadmap. And in this roadmap, we have different versions of our national e-health interoperability framework. So, maintenance and evolution of this NIF is necessary because we built this interoperability framework iteratively with different versions. And the maintenance and the evolution could be at different level, and we can have impact at different level. It could be at business case level, an evolution of a business case or for a new business case. It could be at interoperability use case level, the evolution of a use case. It could be also a new version of an IHE profile. It could be a new version of a national profile that you have defined for your own use cases. And we can also have evolution of norm and standards. So if it's a new business case, the best practice is to say, yes, okay, we have a new business. Do we have already use case that we can use in order to answer this business case or not, or part of a use case? And also analyze if we have underlying functional and technical specifications that we can reuse, sorry. So this is what it could be. We have this new new business case, sorry, business needs. And this business need is answered by two new use cases and one reuse use cases. And for the new use cases, we have a new profile, a new specification, and for the other, we can reuse functional and technical specification. If it's an update of a business case or a use case, we need to do a gap analysis in order to estimate if it's really necessary to address this new evolution, and what is the cost and what is the impact on interoperability and in other business needs and on the other business case and functional and technical specification. If it's a new profile, if it's a profile come from IHE So this we will be able to use this profile to address new use case. So the best practices is to have a survey regularly of new profiles at IHE level, and what is the maturity of this profile and could it be used. And it could be also a new profile come from national business needs. And in that case, for this new profile, as I said, pay attention of the formalization in order to reuse it. If it's a new version of profile, this is the same thing that for a new version of business needs or a use case, we must to analyze the gap between an old version and a new version, and is it really necessary to use this new version? As Charles also said, if a profile is well adopted and well used, why migrate to the new version of this profile? And also, if we use this new version of profile, it could be could introduce some interoperability issues. So yeah, I put just the example of the new version of MAG profile and what is the impact on already use cases using this MAG profile. It could be also a new version of standard. We have regularly new version, for example, of fire standard, and how to manage this different version of standard. So again, we need to do a gap analysis of the evolution of new standard and decide if it's possible or not, and what is the cost of the adoption of these new standards. So I think this is my last slide. This is, and I think that, yeah, I'm on time, I think. So what is the benefits of the use of the IHE methodology in order to define a national e-health interoperability framework? Yeah, the first benefits is the reduce of the cost and the risk, because we use well-known and mature profile and specification. The second benefit is it facilitates the training of all the stakeholders, because with this IHE profile, you have also training and presentation of this profile. The IHE methodology also standardize and share this methodology with different entities, and we can have feedbacks from this methodology. Yeah. The other point, it's allow the definition of e-health interoperability roadmap, and to drive the adoption of all this profile in order to answer your use case. And the last point is also important to share experience during Connectathon and during Projectathon and during different session using this methodology and using IHE profile. Yes, just a few words of KEREVAL. We are a French testing lab. For IHE, we develop and maintain the technique, the interoperability testing platform. We also do consulting in in interoperability testing and in the elaboration of a national health interoperability framework. We are also a conformity testing lab in order to ensure the compliance to a profile, either IHE profile or national profile. And we do supporting during different interoperability testing events. And I put some references in my presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. I don't know if you have any question, or we can also have some talk during coffee break. Yeah.
Ole Vilstrup from Denmark. There's always a choice between sharing in different ways. I've seen seldom the choice of doing both. So have you considered integrating that choice in your NIHIF?
The choice of
doing messaging or sharing data in documents?
Yes. No, there is no definitive choice. It depends on the business needs, and as I said, also on the already deployed architecture, and also on the we had some issues with legacy products that are already in place, and which, for example, it's difficult to add interoperability exchange. For example, if we want to deploy an XDS architecture with this legacy product, it's not easy. So in this case, we choose point-to-point, for example, via an IMHD interface or a Fire interface. So this is not, we haven't got a definitive choice. It depends on the context. For our electronic patient record, yes, we use this XDS architecture, and when we want to exchange information with other application, we also use front, for example, as MHD. So it's a mixed, and it depends on the context.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Alain, for that presentation. It's the first time I see such an overview, so really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a question that I think you inferred that it might come in the next presentation about scaling. As many of the architectures profiles you discussed here, your colleague mentioned about test heavily, but I've seen in the French system with my French colleagues, when a new system goes to scale, real world scale, it can often collapse. For example, SPO2 testing at home with COVID. I just wondered if you had a thought about scaling.
Okay. So yeah, it could be a good idea to yeah, okay. It will be a good subject. Thank you. Okay. So thank you very much.
Questions? So thank you very much, Alain. And thank you all for attending. And now will be the coffee break. And we can come back here at 11:15 for the vendor track or in the